G'day guys, my name's iRide Taz. This is Steve, my 96 Yamaha Virago or XV750 budget bobber build, and this is the final walk around of the modifications that I've done. So guys, this is Steve. He's a Yamaha XV750. He's a Gen 2, and the Gen 2s have got the dual shocks at the back. The Gen 1 that you see on Pipeburn and YouTube all the time, converted into a cafe racer, is actually a monoshock. And this bike was basically created to compete against the Harley Sportster and those sorts of machines. It's a really unusual design. Stock, it's got a big teardrop tank and 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock guards front and rear. It's a full dresser, and I wanted to strip it down and make it a bobber style, and I think I've achieved that. I'm really actually very, very happy with how this bike's come out. It's sort of known as the ugly duckling of the cruiser world, and ultimately I wanted to strip it down and turn it into something that is cool, and I think I've achieved that. I'm really happy with how this has turned out. So let's have a walk around of it, and I'll show you some of the modifications that I've done. There are videos on most of this, so check out the playlist. Yeah, let's have a walk around. Guys, we're going to go front to rear with this walk around. Up front, you can see that I left the wheels the stock colour. They are bronze with silver accents. I did have it in the back of my head that I'd take them off and paint them black, and I didn't, because ultimately I didn't want to cheapen the look. I'm not a huge fan of bikes just being sprayed matte black. I just don't like them. I just don't think it looks very good and the paint chips off. I wanted to go something different. Well, different out there. It's my style, the patina style, but you don't see that many patinaed Viragos around. Yeah, so I left the wheels stock, and I'm happy I did. You can see that I've taken the front guard and cut it down into a bob front fender, and I've put some fork gaiters on, and up holding the cables, I took a big sort of chrome plastic embossed with Yamaha trim piece off. I just used a bit of 1" or 25mm Bunnings metal stock, cut it down to just create a sort of trim piece that holds the cabling. It's got a shroud on the light, or a peak on the light. I like that look. I think it looks very retro, so I left it on. The indicators, instead of using bullet indicators, I went clear round. They are halogen, but they're 5 watt, so I had to use a resistor to make sure that I didn't have hyper flash. That was very easy and worked an absolute treat. So guys, up here we've got a few modifications. These are 1" lift risers or handlebar clamps. The handlebars are 22mm or 7/8, and I bought these off eBay. They clear the tank perfectly, so you can go lock to lock without hitting the tank and chipping or denting the tank. The only downer was that the stock key doesn't fit and turn under the 1" rise bars. So I just took the key, cut one side off, cut the top section in half. Key still goes in and out, turns. You've got enough leverage with that section to still turn it easily. Just that, even though it looks a bit dodgy, was the simplest way around the issue. That was actually the only issue I really struck doing the handlebar conversion on this bike. The bars themselves are eBay China Z or Z bars. They've got 8 inches of lift, so it's 9 inches total, and I'm running that with the stock cabling and wires. And brake lines, I think they look great. They're really narrow. They suit the bike perfectly. I'm really happy with how the bars have turned out. These are just 7/8 or 22mm Coke bottle grips. I got them off thirdgear.com.au. Cheap, easy, comfortable, just a perfect grip for this bike. You can see that I have got bar and mirrors on it, just something different. And where the stock mirrors go, I just use some Selly Need It, which is like JB World, but it's much easier to obtain in Australia through Bunnings. I just use some Selly's Need It to block up these holes, and then I painted it with some black epoxy paint to finish it. These are a couple of breather filters that I bought off Autobarn. This is a dual carb motorcycle. Ultimately, these breathers just vent, and these were just added to the hoses for the look more than anything. There is a bit of a filter in each of those plastic enlarged areas, so you probably don't need to run this, but without it I thought that it just didn't look finished and it looked a bit sketch, so I am pleased that I added them. They were only about $15 each from Autobarn, and I think it just finishes off this side of the bike. Just a fuel filter, again from Autobarn and super cheap. This doesn't run any sort of in-tank filter, and so because I go the patina look and I didn't seal this tank, I just used it stock from the factory. I just run a fuel filter to make sure that there's no crap getting into my carbs and blocking them up. Also on this side you can see the bottle opener that I've added. It came through eBay. It's sort of got a stock brass patina look. There was a tab down here to mount that I just cut off, and I used the mounting bracket that used to hold the big bug eye side pod to just put that on. Without that, and without the bandana hanging from the handlebars, there'd just be a big black negative space there, and I just think it'd look funny, so it just detracts the eye from the negative space. These are foot pegs that I got off eBay. They're designed for this bike. They've got a very unique and ingenious dowel system to allow them to pivot, to fine adjust and fit different bikes. Incredibly comfortable, really quite good quality. I'm very happy with them. They sort of give it a more rugged dirt bike style peg, and it suits the look of the bike in my opinion. The tank itself, again, I bought off eBay from a seller, Messino19. It was $329, give or take, delivered. Only took about 2 weeks to arrive from China. Fits perfectly, holds 12 litres of fuel. Yeah, this is the second tank I've bought from that seller. Really happy with it. I went my trademarked patina look. So I used sort of salt, vinegar, water, bleach, a whole bunch of different things to patina that tank. I also left it outside for a couple of weeks just so the weather worked its magic on it. I sprayed a thin black line around the bottom just to sort of mean that the black reflects up rather than light reflecting or light coloration reflecting up, and it just makes the tank, in my experience, look a little bit darker and a little bit older and more crusty, more patinaed, more distressed. To protect the patina on this bike, instead of using clear coat, I use linseed oil and mineral turpentine. Linseed at 75%, mineral turpentine at 25%, and I sort of used a rag to paint that on. An absolute cracker of a technique. Eventually, because clear coat doesn't like sticking to rust, it flakes off and looks very dry and looks very ordinary. The linseed oil gives it an oiled look, a wet look, and it looks fantastic. I'm really happy with it. On the engine mounts, I just used a belt that I bought from the op shop for 50 cents to create a glove holder, and I bought some just riggers gloves from Bunnings. They were 11 bucks. I distressed them, or I patinaed them with a whole bunch of different boot polishes and beeswax to give them that old look. The seat is a Highway Hawk seat. I bought it off eBay. It came from America. It was a little bit more expensive than some of the seats that I've used before, but I was really happy with it. It's very comfortable, and I would absolutely use them again. The springs, they're 3-inch. I got them from a swap meet. They're off a Harley. I'm not sure what era. They're softer than the springs that I've used before. The eBay 3-inch springs are actually quite hard and uncomfortable. These have got a fair bit of give in them, so I recommend hunting around and finding springs that suit your weight. As a side bag, I've got a Vietnam era US military surplus bum bag. I found it in a second-hand shop, and it's just big enough to hold a couple of litres of water, a litre of fuel, and my Jetboil stove so that I can make some coffee when I'm out riding. The side covers on this bike are plastic, which creates a little bit of a nightmare when you want to go the patina look. So I painted it in spray putty and then brown paint, and then I sanded through the brown paint to the spray putty to give it that look, and I'm really happy with it. I think it's come up well, and I think it's by far and away the best plastic patina job that I've done. The seat pan there, it's an eBay item. They're quite cheap, they're everywhere on eBay, and it just happens to fit the stock holes perfectly. No real modification on that one. I just had to bend the tabs down, and they're designed for Sportsters, and it just happens to fit the Gen 2 XV750. Just covers up all the electrics. The TCI used to sit under the seat, and it's now in the toolbox holder or the glove box. I just had to drill a hole in the back of that to put the wires through, and it looks absolutely fantastic. It's sort of almost sized as if from factory they meant the TCI to go in there. That's the regulator rectifier in the stock position. They're the pillion peg footrests. I've cut them down, I've taken the pillion pegs off, and it's left the regulator rectifier in the stock position, but it gives it that single-seater look. Again, I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. To mount the rear indicators, I just used some Bunnings metal stock, used a 20-cent piece to get the radius, cut them, used a stock hole located there that's for a sissy bar mount, and then just some acorn nuts to clean it up. You can see the wiring for the resistors to stop the hyperflash just running in underneath the seat pan there. They are just mounted in that position. I've got new tyres front and rear. They're Dunlop 404s. I pretty much run Dunlop 404 on all my cruiser bikes, so have never had any problems with them. They're quite cheap, they're freely available in all the sizes I use, off the shelf. The tail light I got from thirdgear.com.au. It's a Lucas replica, works a treat. And on the rear end, I also just added a reflector to give the bike a little bit more stock look and just make it a little bit more legal. Guys, the fender itself is a cut down stock fender. I measured it up and I cut the end section off it. I cut about a third off it, and I moved the mounting points that should have been there to pull it down to 9 o'clock back, and it pulled it up into that position, and I'm really actually happy with how that looks. I didn't really want to put a swing arm mounted fender on this bike. I've done it before on other bikes, and some of the Viragos that I've seen with swing arm mounted fenders just don't quite look right in my opinion. They're either too narrow, the trailer fenders just look a little bit cheap and nasty. I wanted to do something with the stock fender, and I think I've achieved something that looks really cool. I just stripped the paint off with a strip it wheel on the angle grinder, and ultimately patinaed it, and then treated the patina with the linseed oil and turpentine mix. The shocks are from a Rebel 250 or a CMX 250. They're a aftermarket Chinese copy. They're 10.5 inches eye to eye. I put the preload on the stiffest setting to just make sure that I wasn't going to bottom out and hit the inside of the fender, and they look an absolute treat. They suit the bike. I've used them before on other projects, and they just seem to be a great shock. Yeah, really happy with how that turned out. These were on the bike when I got them. They're Jardines. They sound great. The bike's been jetted, I believe, for them, so I didn't really want to mess about and sort of destroy these exhausts when they sounded great and suit the look of the bike. So all I did is basically just wrap the header pipes and left them stock, and I'm really happy with how they sound, and the bike goes really well with them on. It's just got a very low, meaty grumble. It's not obnoxiously loud. Yeah, I just thought I would leave them be. No point messing with them, no point making something myself that was more dodgy than what was on the bike, sounded more tinny than what was on the bike. And you've also got a K&N air filter. There is a big pod or bug eye, as they're called in the Virago world, on this side that acts as the air filter, air intake. I removed that and I mounted the horn to that stock position and painted it just to hide it. You could cut them off, but if you ever want to return the bike to stock, if you're cutting tabs off, it makes it very difficult. The silicone or rubber elbow that runs to that pod, I span it around and I inserted it into the back of the air filter, 68mm, fitted perfectly, and the bike runs really well without actually being fiddled with or rejetted. But I do believe that the bike might have been rejetted to run those pipes as well as what it does. There's absolutely no farting, backfiring, popping. The bike runs absolutely perfectly. I have also found that because Viragos use the top tube here as the air box, that they are pretty tolerant of having air filter mods, because this is not drawing the air directly into the carbs. It goes up here into the top tube and then down into the carbs. So I have found over the years, messing with a few Viragos, that they're pretty tolerant of changes in air filter. That is a horn off a 60s Harley that I had lying around in the shed. It already had some natural patina, so I just whacked it on. All of the control levers were chrome, but they were starting to look pitted and pretty ordinary, so I just sanded them back to a brushed finish. I also did the same with the fork legs. They were really pitted, and the protective clear coat layer was all flaky, so I sanded all that off, and instead of shining them back up to a polished mirror finish, I just left them at brushed. I did the same with the silencers. Just too much chrome didn't really suit the bike. I'm pretty happy with just the engine cases and the shocks and a few other accents being polished finish. Didn't really mess around with the engine at all. It was in excellent condition. I just had a ain't broke, don't fix it of attitude with that engine. It's in remarkable condition for the age of the bike, and I didn't want to mess around with it too much. So of course the main modification is the peanut tank, and everyone's going to ask me where I got that from in the comments. Messino 19. It's made in China. Search it up yourself, guys. All I did was literally put in XV750 peanut tank and it came up. Please don't ask me for this link or that link, because every country is different. It takes me longer to search for the link for your country than it would for you to search for the link. So just search for the links yourselves, please, guys. The seller is Messino 19. But ultimately, there's the bike. We should fire it up after all this time. I hate it when you're watching walkarounds and they don't fire up the bike, so let's fire it up. So guys, that's Steve, my Yamaha Virago XV750 bobber build. Hope you enjoyed the series, and all of these modifications basically have videos. Just go to the playlist and check them out. If you want to support the channel, as always, go to buymeacoffee.com/iRideTaz. Buy Me a Coffee is great. It's sort of like Patreon, but it allows you to make one-off payments and you don't have to be a member, and there's different payment sort of methods that aren't available through Patreon. These videos are free to consume, but they're certainly not free to make, and the very small amount of YouTube revenue and the small amount of support I get from you guys through Buy Me a Coffee just helps take some of the sting out of the financials of building these bobbers. I build them for myself. I ride them for myself. I don't build them to flip. I don't build them for views. I build them for myself to ride and enjoy in places like this and in weather like this. Just in case you were wondering, this is the northern end of Lake Barrington. Absolutely gorgeous spot. We are getting some fantastic weather here at the moment, and it was an absolute joy to come down here, ride Steve to this location and do this video. So guys, it's with a bit of sadness that I finished this build series. Within a couple of weeks I'll be back. I'll be back with something different, and I hope you'll enjoy that just as much as you enjoyed the XV750 build. So guys, my name is iRideTaz. My name is Chris. Thanks, and I'll see you next time. Till then, I'm out.